Hello, welcome back to Laser Cut and Fly RC Models. I'm the Laser Model Guy. What I'm going to do today is carry on building the Spitfire. Now, this is the plan I'm using. I downloaded the plan from AutoZone off the internet, and I showed you how to do that in Spitfire 1, the previous video. And then I sent the digital file away, and I've had this printed full size. So this is the plane, or the model that we're making. Well, this is the fuselage. I've got the wing plan over there, and what I'm going to do today is carry on and finish all the components for the fuselage, and then I'm going to start working on the wing. So with all that said, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notifications button so you don't miss any content, and let's get on with it. Okay, so you remember in the last video what we did was we made all these formers from these formers up the top here. What we've decided is we're going to cover the aircraft in aura cover, which is the film covering, the heat shrink film, whereas the original was covered in 1/8 by 3/8 balsa planking all over and then sanded down, so it was like a fully wooden outer shell, so to speak. So in order to use the aura cover, what we've got to do is we've got to put stringers along, which is thin balsa strips, into these notches, and then the covering will sit on top of those and form the shape of the fuselage. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, where we've brought the nose out, or brought this keel out, this central keel, we're now going to put a round former on the end here, which will then link to all of these formers through these stringers. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to produce an ellipse like this, and then the width of that ellipse is going to be the width. This is the aircraft here, and right here is the red line where we're going to put this mounting for the motor. I've done the motor in red here, so the width of that ellipse has to be the width of this red line where it is between these two outline lines here. So the best way for us to get the length of this is if we were to click on that red line and then bring it down to the point where it is just on the outside of that line, and then do the same here, so that we're just on the outside of that line at the bottom. And then we know that if we look at the sizes of this, the height of that is 78.374. okay, so if we make our ellipse here 78.374 high, wide, sorry, 78.374, and that is now the same width as that, the body of the aircraft. And now the height of the of that former is from this line here, because this was the distance that the motor would send us forward, is from this distance here between this line and this line here. So all we need to do is get our measuring tool, and all I'm going to do is click on there, and then come down to the outside of that line there, and we can see on the top right there it's 99.02 millimeters. Let me just do that again. Okay, Now that's at 100 millimeters, so I've now made sure I've gone to the outside of the line. So 100 millimeters or 100.59 millimeters. 100.59. So if we make the height of this 100.59, and that should be the shape at the front of our fuselage that we will be able to mount our motor on. And just to check that, what we can do is we can grab that shape, just bring it down and just check it against. You can see that that line crosses just where our marker line there is, the red line. Yep, so I'm quite happy with that. And then if we bring that up, that should be the right size there for our for our nose. But what we'll do is we'll just make sure that that is exactly how we want it. Now I want that centre to snap onto this line here, and if we approach it, so I'll just bring it down so we're not confused by these lines. I've brought it down and it has now snapped to the centre, so that is exactly where we want it. And if I press Control and Shift up, the Shift arrow key, we could take that up, and then if I press Control and Shift and then the up arrow key, we'll bring that right onto that point there. Now I notice we're a little bit big, so what I'm going to do is just shrink that down. Now if I bring that across, you can see how it's considerably narrower than the preceding former. So I'll just Control Z and send that straight back to there. Now how we put all these slots in, you'll remember, and made sure they were all identical so they're all going to line up when we assemble the aircraft, is we made a little like a spider matrix over here, and when we put that spider matrix right on that cross between the edge of the former and the centre line, or the general centre line that we've put from the motor to the centre of the back of the aircraft, you'll see that this line goes through the centre of each of our notches for our stringers. So I'm going to do exactly the same with this. I'm going to bring it to the first of all the centre line of our ellipse, and now all we need to do is select our ellipse, select that spider, that shape, bring it across, and now we can work on it over here. Now there is no slot at the top and the bottom because it's going to sit on front of the keel there, and that keel will be the that centerpiece. So if we make a square, or make a square over here, and all we're going to do is we're going to make that 3.2 by 3.2. So we'll just alter the height and the width to 3.2 and 3.2. We can now make a copy, so Control C, and then we bring that down and we'll just put that next to the one where it's going to go. And then if we hover near the next one, we could press Control V, Control V, Control V, 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 and V. For Control V, just so we can get the whole thing done straight away. Okay, now what we find is if we select this and we bring it towards our blue line, it will suddenly snap into place. That's now snapped into place on the blue line, so it's centered on that blue line. and if we bring it so that the centre of the edge, or the edge touches the outer circle where the centre line is, or where that blue line is, we can then correct it and it'll be more or less where we want it to be by changing its angle slightly. Okay, maybe just go a little closer. There we are. And if we just stretch that a tiny amount, now we only ever want to stretch that across a tiny amount, because stretching it across, what that does is it leaves this shape exactly where it is, but it means you've definitely crossed this line, so the snipping tool will work. If you don't cross that line, if you're not over that line, you know, this line here, you won't be able to use the snipping tool. So with that said, what I'm going, and the only reason we move it a tiny amount is if you move it too far, you can see how it distorts the shape. And there will be a minuscule amount of distortion anyway, but not enough to bother a 1/8 piece of balsa when you scale this down to 1/8 or 3.2 millimeters. So we snip that away, snip that away, snip that away, and that's that one done. So what I'll do is I'll do the rest of these exactly the same way. Snap that to the center, bring it to more or less where we want it, make sure the lines are parallel, stretch it a tiny amount just so that it goes over, and then snip away the bits we don't want. And what I'll do now is I'll just very quickly go around the rest. Okay, so that's our nose now completed, or the outer shape of the nose completed. The next thing we want to do is we're going to put the shape for the motor mounting into the center. Just before we do that, we'll label this up as A. In 4mm letters. I'll just put that right in the center. There we go. If I just change that to our engraving layer, and then what we'll see is we've got our letter A there. Okay, so the shape for the motor. Now I've done this shape earlier. This was the nose cone for the contester, the Keelcraft contester. So what I want to do, I'm going to use the same motor. So I want this inner shape here. So all I'm going to do is, using my original template, I'm going to do ungroup, and the contester is in a series on the channel, so you'll be able to find that if you want to see all of this and see how all this was done. And all I'm going to do is just take that, I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to come to the center here, and then I'll group that now while it's there, so that will stay together as a little group. I can now delete the contester nose. Now where I want to do this, what I want to do with this is make sure that it is exactly in the center here, and what I'll do is I'll just turn that round to the side. I'll explain why in a second, and I'll bring that up and I'll make sure it's right in the center of the motor, just like that. So that's going to be in the centre of this nose. This where the motor will mount, but this round hole here is going to be where the cables go through. So that has to be off to the side so that it's away from the keel. Because if it was down the bottom here, obviously we'd have the keel running through the centre of our space. So if I just grab those components there, bring them down to where we've got our letter A, and then all I'll do is I will group that, and that's our motor mount at the nose completed. I'll just put that in place on our and you can see how the stringers will come from the end of the nose here. They'll come up and then all the way through, and this one in the centre will follow through all the way through there. So I think that is absolutely perfect. Okay, so next thing I want to do is, if we just look at the main plan here, that last former that we've made, the front bulkhead to mount the motor just sits there on this red line here, but the nose of the aircraft still comes forward. Now you remember in the first video what I did was I made these parts here, the nose sides and the nose top and the nose bottom, and they were made just here. I made a small bit of a bit like an extension for the keel of that part there, which was this top here that just fits in there, and then I made this piece as well, which would be this bottom part of the keel, which would fit just there. So you can see how that would fit in. And so what I want to do now is I just want to finish off the nose, and the way I'm going to do that is we're going to extend out the keel with these components, and then top and bottom, and then I'm going to make another round former, which will be the very front of the aircraft. Now if we have a look up here on the plan, it shows this, and it's almost round, where if you measure this, the height of it would be, so I'm just going to measure from this outline to this outline, the height of it would be up on the right there, it says 64.64 millimeters, and then if we look at this width here, the width would be again 64.01. So I think we're looking at a 64.5 millimeter circle there. So if we get rid of our measuring tool, and if we go to an ellipse, and what we'll do is we'll just produce that, and we'll go to the sizes up here and put 64.5, 64.5 width, and then 64.5 height, 64.5 height. Then I think that will be our size. So if we get our line it up, if we line up the top and the bottom with the top of this little piece here, this extension to the keel, and the bottom we want to line up with this corner here of the keel. So all I'm going to do is just move that just slightly. Now I think that is going to be about right for the very end, and that will go around the motor. So if I use my offset tool and select our component, go to offset, and I'm going to come in by, let's see if 15mm will do it. 15mm. Okay. Now 15mm is a bit too tight because you can see that we're actually touching the motor there. So let me just go up slightly. Can we avoid that motor, or even would it be appropriate to move the motor down a little bit? Alternatively, what we can do is we can use our offset tool and come down to, I don't know, 13mm maybe. 13mm. Let's remove the original one. Okay, and that gives us a nice clearance there. So we've got a clearance there at the top of, let me see, to our motor of, let's say 1.5mm. If we look at the outside of that, that's 32mm. So it's the inside one that would be the actual size of the motor. I gave it a little clearance of 1 millimetre all the way around. But anyway, that looks like that would work. So when we're assembling, of course, we will make sure that we're not touching the motor when we fit that front piece. So if we come off there, what we can do is we can select both of these and then bring those over to our little spider over here. Now what I think we can do is on our components here, we can add a little protrusion there so that we can key into this with our pieces, and we'll also do the same on this former as well. We'll put a little slot and we'll put a little key on our nose formers here. So if I just bring that out there and I make a rectangle, and I make that rectangle 3.2 or 3.3 millimeters wide, because this is going to be 3mm ply that we mount the motor on. That won't be balsa. So if I make that 3mm wide, so 6mm high, and then if I bring that down and I just snap this line here to that line and then bring the top down so that it's perfectly level there. Okay, and then if I just stretch this inwards a little without moving this outer part, then what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to snip that. If I now go back to my snipping tool and take that out, we've now got a little key at the top, and if I do exactly the same on this side, so I should have made copies of the first one, to be fair. So 3mm wide, 3mm wide. In fact, this one will be going into balsa wood, so we want that to be 3.2mm wide. 3.2, and we'll have it again. We'll have it 6mm high. And then if I bring that down, in fact we'll make copies of that first, make a copy, and then I bring it down We really want that to follow the shape of the nose, don't we? But having said that, we'll be putting a 3.2mm piece on the end, and then we will have to sand it down. So we could probably leave that as it is and then sand the whole nose down once it's all assembled. Because bear in mind that will only be 3mm. Okay, I think we can live with that, with a little sanding job during assembly. So we get our snips and we snip that away. Okay, so I'm going to do now exactly the same with the bottom one. And I've just saved, so Control V, Control V. Okay. So the next part of this program, or part of this plan, would be to insert at the top a slot there, which is going to be 3.2 by 6, and one at the bottom which will be 3.2 by 6. So if I bring that one across and line up on that line, and then take this one across and line up there, then what we'll find is we've now got, if I just stretch that down slightly, what I can do now is just take my snipping tool, snip those bits out, and what we've got now at the bottom of our very nose tip, we've got a slot that where we will be able to insert this, and that piece, that slot will fit right in there. So it'll come down to there, and then we'll be sanding the front down so it's slightly rounded. And then what we can do at the top here is exactly the same. I'll just click on that and convert it to the cutting layer. If they're different layers, then they won't, the snipping tool won't work. Line that up with the very edge, just extend it through so that it overlaps, which will allow us to snip. So there we have slots now cut in for our top and bottom, so we may as well do exactly the same here. And so that will sit flat on the keel, and then these components, which are going to form the shape of the nose, will plug in and they'll just fit in there nicely. I'll do the same for the sides as well, but I won't go through that process. All I'll be doing is getting to the centre of the former there, and I'll be making these slots fit into the sides. So right, the last thing for me to do here is, if we take another one of our shapes and we reduce the height of that to 3.2, and we convert it to our cutting layer, and we copy, Control C, and then all we want to do is put one of these at each of our points where the stringers are going to finish. Okay, and in exactly the same way as we've done before, what I'm going to do is just bring that to the line, slide it up till it's in about the right place, rotate it so that it's flat to the and then with a tiny overlap, I'm just going to snip that away, and I'll do that all the way around until we've got our nose formed. Okay, so with that nose or the end of the nose there being completed. That's more or less all we need to do with the fuselage for now. So what I'm going to do is move on to the tailplane and the fin and the rudder. So to make the tailplane, all I'm going to do is just use our line tool, and then going to the outside of the line, I'm going to just trace that round just as we have done with all our other components. So using a different layer so that we've got a bit of contrast so we can see what we're doing, I'm going to go to the outside of the line all the way around, and we'll adjust these. Once we've been round, we'll make an adjustment to these and get them all spot on right onto the line. Okay, and then come inside and then straight across the back, and there we have it. Okay, so if we now just bring that to a, oops, if we now just bring that to space down here, what we can do is go to nodes, and we can just make these into smooth curve nodes, just like that. Hover over them, press S. We'll leave the two corner ones there as corner nodes. Okay. In fact, what we really need to do with this now is we need to move that back onto the shape and just make sure that we are in the right place, right on the outside of that line all the way around. So I think we just need to move over slightly. So I'll press Control and Shift, and then use the arrow keys to just move us into place. And now if I come back to this, go back onto nodes, and we can now start bringing those in to the edge of that line. And if it gets a bit tricky, like that one there seems to be jumping around a little bit, what we can do is with that node selected, press Control Shift, and we can manipulate it using our arrow keys. Okay, just snap those into that edge of that line, just like that. And there we go. They're all in around about the right place, I would have thought. That needs to be a smooth curve node, that one. Okay, I think that follows quite nicely, but what we can do with that is we can make a copy, Control C and then Control V, and then we can flip that copy like that, and then we can bring it and we can line it up on the center of that one there, and we can see that there are some slight differences. So all we need to do is make one side of this match with, if I bring this out now to nodes, and then if I bring this one out to match, then what we'll find is these will become, or it will become identical on both sides. We only have to do this to one side. Just get those two lines to follow each other. And now what we can do is, if we take that one that is selected, we delete the other one. And now if we make a copy of this, Control C and then Control V, and then we flip that, what we should find is that they're now identical. So what we know now is that that is symmetrical both ways. See how they just fit nicely right on top of one another there. So we know that that is absolutely symmetrical. Okay, so that's the tailplane made, so we can delete one of those. What we want now is to create the elevator, and what we'll do with this is we'll make this strip here that will have a strip of carbon on it, so that you've got a nice strong join in the middle there. But let's just make the outline to start with. I'm going to do it exactly the same way. Okay, and then up to join there. Okay, so if we now just move all of those nodes in, we'll do it the other way this time. So just bring them in until they touch the edge of that line. And then also while we're there we can, we'll move them all in before we convert them to smooth curve nodes. And if any of them are a bit jumpy, we can just move them with our okay, just one by one move all of those nodes right onto the edge of that line. Okay, so if we do exactly the same now, we'll bring that across, we'll bring that down here, we'll go back to nodes and we'll convert all of those to smooth curve nodes, just like that. not where the corners are though. Want those to remain sharp. Okay, so if we come off there and then we control copy, control V, and then we'll flip that one, and then when we snap that onto the position where that is, this one's a little closer I think, but what we'll do is we'll work on this right hand side. In fact no, we'll work on this left hand side here and we'll make this match. So go to nodes, and those corner ones just snap into place nicely because there is actually a corner there to do that. Okay, and there's a little bit of moving needed with our nodes. There we go, that is fairly close I would have thought. So what I think now is if we leave that one selected and we just bring it down, we can delete the other one, and then if we copy that and then make another copy, we can then bring that down, and when that snaps into place we can see that is now identical both sides. So we've now made that one uniform as well, and that will be our elevator. So if we just bring that up to our tailplane and just check for fit, we'll find that line will just snap nicely onto there, and I think that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so that's our, we'll just control Z, put that back where it was. That's our tailplane and elevator made. So I'll just bring those over. And next we just want to make the fin and the rudder, and we'll do that in exactly the same way. So using our line tool, I'm just going to trace that round, and then I'm going to convert it all to smooth curve nodes again, just as we did before. And what we'll do is I will show you what that looks like in 1 minute. Okay, I've finished that. So all I've done is, as I've said, copied the outline of this, made these into smooth curve nodes, copied the outline of the rudder as well, and I've made all that outside there into smooth curve nodes, and you can see how well that fits. If I just group them both and place them back on top, you can see that's a really good copy of that outline. So with that done, I'll just bring these over to where we're working over on this side, and next what we need to do is we'll be making the components for the main wing. Now we've got 2 spars here which are already laid out for us, so we'll just trace the outline of those. We've got the 2 strengthening pieces for the center part of the wing and the dihedral. They'll be made out of ply with a slot cut in them. There's something there to look at. There's a slot cut in, and underneath the aircraft, if we go back up here, there will be a piece of ply going between those 2 spars, which will support the undercarriage. And also we've got our formers here for the actual wing ribs themselves. So with that said, I will stop this video now and we'll produce the wings in the next video, and then we'll be ready to cut out and start assembling. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time, and we'll make the components for the wings.